Apologies. Have my camera on. I'm in between like a lot of different meetings, but yes. So good afternoon, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. We've got several people on here, so that's great. I think just continuing to remember about the meeting change. I tend to get forget or whatever, but I think this time works for everybody, and it's not a Wednesday. A lot of people had things conflicting with that. So I won't belabor us and want to get right into our agenda for today. The first thing we're going to do is get the legislative updates from Susan, which would include the tour that was done yesterday. So for those of you, for those of you who were able to do that, I hope you all had a great time. I really hated not being able to do that myself, but I'm looking forward to hearing how that went. And so Susan, included in the legislative update would also be the bills that we've been following. And Susan had sent out, Vicki had sent out for you all to be able to go into the link to see the different comments about the different legislation. So hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit of an update on that from Susan as well. So Susan, I will turn it over to you for the legislative updates.
Yes, thank you. And yesterday was great. I hope that we can schedule maybe a couple more once we can travel again. I don't think we have to do it during session. And so while it was great to be there, while a lot of stuff was happening, I mean, it was kind of crazy. I think we can try to do this maybe even on a quarterly basis, because Carol can do the tours. And it was nice to see, she gave a little bit of history about the Capitol, the building itself. And then of course we could see the areas where all the financial hearings go, and the judicial hearings. And then there are some space for the Senate, space for the House. But of course, we were on the fourth floor where you could see, I mean, there was the gallery up high. Everyone else is on the third floor, but where you would sit and go in, observe on a Senate, and then the House over on the other side. And so because most of the legislation we are tracking had crossed over already, there were 4 pieces of legislation when we got there yesterday that we were particularly interested in seeing whether or not they crossed over. Senate Bill 230, which is the Foster Parents Bill of Rights, and we will talk about that in a minute. It did cross over. House Bill 603 added to the list of circumstances to which you can almost proceed directly to TPR, and it did not cross over. This legislation continues to kind of crop up and doesn't really get any traction. I look for it every year just because it really could change things if it ever were to pick up any speed. But I think it just had a first reader, second reader, never really went anywhere. The concern with this legislation from Susan's point of view, that's all, is if we open it up too much to too many circumstances that do not require reasonable effort and that sort of thing, then we really do start to minimize some of that work around families, I think, and we're not required to do it. It is an imperfect system for sure, but that bill really could move TPR along a lot faster than I think a lot of people would be comfortable with. So, and some people would be very comfortable with it. So I am just giving you my 2 cents, but it did not cross over. We were also watching this TANF bill. There's some legislation that crossed over that the governor really was very interested in himself, and it was that allowed pregnant women to be covered by TANF, even if they don't have another child. So that gives, already there was access to Medicaid for pregnant women at a higher income limit, but the cash assistance, which is not much, but it's something, and there seems to be bipartisan support for it. So it, of course, has already crossed over. The feedback that we got from our subject matter expert was great to have additional support for pregnant women. The thing is that those months would count toward the lifetime 48 months. And so there was another piece of legislation, 565, that would extend the months from 48 to 60, which is allowable by the feds. Georgia took the very conservative approach back in 1996, I think it was, when AFDC became TANF and the Work Responsibility Act went into place. And we are allowed to extend it to 60, but we never have. Well, that legislation did not cross over, although I have been told today, unofficially, that the language will likely end up in another bill that did cross over. What hung that bill up, from what I understand, is the allowance to have a car. I know you want to roll your eyes, and the resource limit increased from, I think, $1,000 to $5,000. And I don't know why there will be an issue of having a car to get to work, but that seemed to be what held it up. I think what we would be most interested in would be to allow those months to be extended to 60 if we are going to vote in that pregnant women can receive. But 565 did not cross over. And then we were also paying attention to House Bill 428, which basically said, I think, if I understand it correctly, and I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but I felt like we needed to watch it. You know how if you qualify for Medicaid right now, when you are under a certain age, then you have continuous Medicaid coverage regardless of if your circumstances change during that time. This would expand, if you ever qualify, to cover you up to 18. And like I said, I did not expect that to go anywhere. Any legislation that seems to lean toward expansion of Medicaid typically does not make it in Georgia. It's just not something that is in favor right now by the powers that be. So we were watching that, and so the only legislation that was going to come up right after we ended our tour was Senate Bill 230. So we just went right into the Senate gallery, and 230 did not come up while we were in there because they were discussing this sports and the gambling that had, it was a very interesting conversation. And I think it was a great example of how that legislation did not cross over either. And even though it had support from some of the pretty big leadership, it has nothing to do with our work. This is just about the process. But it was interesting to watch the different opinions that were brought forth in the by various members of the Senate. And there was really a split vote on that. And so it was a great tour. We thought that George A. Peach was going to be there, who is the DHS mascot, but that didn't happen. So if you didn't make it yesterday, I really hope to set up a couple more. One other thing about the Capitol visit, thank you, Angie. It was also really nice to see people. We learned, we made a request that we would have a table in the atrium, and you don't see that as much anymore. And we got declined a week before yesterday. And I learned in between then, mainly Rhonda told me this because the Retirement Association did it, we can book a room in adjacent to the Capitol or one of the rooms in the Capitol, and invite members of certain committees in for lunch. And so you're not out there kind of handing out stuff. It's a very targeted meeting, but that seems to be the way it's going now. So we will do that next year. I know now what to do, and we will do that, and we will have some lunch, and we'll invite certainly the members of the Health and Human Services and the Children and Families Committee, and maybe the appropriation chair to come in and just meet with us briefly. So sorry that didn't work out this year. They've changed it during the pandemic. This is really the first year they've allowed people in. And I think that would be definitely more cost effective than the legislative reception we used to do, when people would just kind of swing by at the end of the day, and we had to use the caterer there, and it was very expensive. And I think the Retiree Association brought in Chick-fil-A. It was good for the legislators. They could just swing by, pick up something that most people like. We could talk with them for a minute and move on. So that is about yesterday's visit. Anybody want to add anything else? I know we've had some comments. It was very informative. And I think that we want to set some more up to give another opportunity. If y'all don't have any questions about that, I want to kind of go on into the legislation. So the first thing, and it's going to be easier if you can follow along on the link. And there are a few codes on this link that I want to tell you what they mean. If you see legislation that's highlighted, the bill, the Senate bill or the House bill in yellow, that is legislation that our agency is supporting. Why is that important? It may or may not be anything, but if it's legislation to do with our work and our agency does not support it, then I think we have to look closely at why. And that's just information. So highlighted in yellow is legislation that our agency supports. And then underneath the description of each bill is whether or not it crossed over. And then I have taken the comments that we have received and just inserted them in there to give you a little bit of insight into that. And Lynn posted the Google Doc right there if you just want to click on it. Awesome. That would, it'll give you kind of up to date where we are. I updated it just a little while ago. And this link will always have the most up-to-date information. It's live link. And so we usually go in and document it every day or every other day. Of course, yesterday was a big day. First legislation we're tracking is the budget, the amended budget. If you were to go to our link on that sheet, House Bill 18, it's going to take you to where all the other legislation is and where the budget lies. But you won't find the amended budget there. You'll only find the proposed FY24. I can't find the final version of House Bill 18 posted yet. Doesn't mean anything. Our friend sent me a copy of it though late last night, and Carol did. And from what I am reading, and she is reading, but please know that the caveat is, until we see it posted, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like the House proposed a $5 million increase to give some funding for alternative housing, which is hoteling. The Senate proposed $10 million increase. Both insisted on their versions, which took it to a conference, and the conference agreement was a $10 million increase to support alternative housing needs between now and June 30th. So in my mind, they did not add any travel money. They did not. I don't think the travel ban is going to be lifted between now and June 30th. That is my understanding. This specifically, they added money, the 10 million for alternative housing options for youth with complex needs. And then they added $4 million to increase funds for technology. And Vicki, we are at the very, very top, right there, 2023 state fiscal year amended budget. No need to click on it. There's nothing there.
How much did we ask for?
Well, I think we were happy with 5 million and we got 10. That's my.
I'm just we'll roll through that money real quick.
Yeah. I think the governor recommended 4.5 or 5 in his proposal, but we ended up with 10. So
It tells me, like Audrey's presentation and all that kind of did a phenomenal job of the issues. So that's good.
yes.
Encouraging.
And trying to be careful to not, go squirrel every time something goes through my mind. But I will say there seems to be 2 themes to the legislation related to child welfare this year. The agency supported legislation is all about controlling and being aware and having time to respond to the children who come into care and to make sure that the resources are there if a child is deprived that has very high behavioral, emotional needs, to have other people be accountable for that. So that is, hang on, Angie, I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to come to you. That seems to be one trend to a good bit of the legislation. For the legislation that the agency does not seem to be, they're not against it, but they're not coming out saying they are supportive of it, is legislation that hastens the path to TPR or adds in extra protections for foster parents, really to the nth degree, which is Senate Bill 230, the one we were looking for yesterday. And I guess the question is, are those extra rights that are being requested to amend the original foster parent Bill of Rights? Y'all don't throw me under the bus if I say this, I'm just going to say it. Do they go too far? I think that is the question on the table. It is not for me to decide, but I think that seems to be the trend, that we have this, let's help us deal with the children coming into care, and then this other one kind of hastening the path to foster parents have more rights. There are less reasons to do reasonable efforts. So let's move more quickly to TPR. Okay, Angie.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, you kind of answered one of it. I watched Audrey and that whole, I just wondered, when we talk about giving extra money, because I don't want to be there for like more hoteling. So I was wondering if they had taught solutions, because part of the problem is, I think, we've thrown money at placements to keep these kids and they still didn't keep them. So, that was my whole thing. If anything else, is more about solutions. And, using that money maybe towards, I don't know. Personally, I'll just say that there was a time when mental health could get custody of kids. I'm not really sure when that stopped or why that stopped. I think there needs to be like more responsibility placed on them and DJJ in terms of providing, because it's just sad to me that like parents who are struggling with these kids' behaviors almost have to be coded as abusers and neglectors in order to get their kids help. That was just, I just wondered if anybody had thought about solutions.
And I think that the legislation that's out there, especially the one that is trying to put some processes in place around juvenile court judges, is, it wouldn't go into effect until July 1st. And so this funding, there's really nothing that can be done other than continue to throw money at it. This is my interpretation between now and June 30th. And so the amended budget is just recognizing it's very expensive,
right?
And shoring that up.
And I was going to say, Angie, the conversations that I've had with, I guess, fly on the wall conversations is the solution right now is to throw money at it because that's what's needed until we can kind of come up with a resolution. I think it's
Yeah.
been clearly stated that, well, if you watched Audrey's presentation, then you
Yeah, it
heard
was great.
example A, B, C, D, and
Yeah.
E. And I mean, it was just, you know, I think it was a bombshell that went off in that room. I mean, I don't even know. I can remember some of the questions, and they really didn't know what to ask. It was like who, what, when, why, how. You know, what facility do we need to build? You know, it was they're very solution focused. But you know, to your point about one of the legislators that I talked to off the record last week, you know, it was a kind of conversation with, you know, the juvenile code rewrite, I think it was 2014 or whatever, really kind of put everything on us. I mean, it really did. And if you want, it kind of, let me rephrase that. It kind of tied the judge's hands on what they could and could not do. And so in retrospect, that changed the way DJJ operated in certain manners. And it certainly, you know, to your point about mental health, I do remember a judge vividly ordering custody to mental health, you know, but I haven't seen that in a
Me
decade.
too, Danny. That happened in when I was a supervisor.
I haven't seen it in a decade or more. You know, I think what I've heard is that they're trying to throw money at it, to use the slogan right now, is because that's what we need right now. You're exactly right. We're using this extra money that's been funded for higher per diem for these kids not to be expelled for 6 months, yet they're still getting kicked out because they've eloped and got a new charge. But then the new charge, they're not being held accountable for the new charge in whatever county they were in, and then you're left to come pick them back up.
Right. And I agree with all the conversation. I think that, you know, certainly this problem we know has been going on for a long time. It's just making catching the attention of other people. But yeah, until there's conversation about the kids being appropriately with the agency tasked to help the family with their needs, we're going to continue to struggle. So I 100% agree with everybody's conversations about it. It's, I mean, you know, it's sad because certainly we don't have the skill set to handle the children, but we definitely are tasked with doing so.
And I think it's a sign of progress if we can keep the attention of the legislators that it's out there how complicated this issue is, and that it is not DFACS for decades and decades failing to do their job. It is more complicated than that, and everything ends
Right.
up, the last house on the block is DFACS. And so I'm
that particular legislator asked me, is OCA helping? And I said, absolutely not. So when we had a whole other discussion that I won't disclose in here, but anyway, it's, you know, it's kind of hard to come up with solutions when there's a lot of mudslinging, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think at some point there's got to be a link between the legislation that was on the table for all of the mental health support and what's going on still with the kids we're having to bring into care. Because, you know, I thought that was going to be some, you know, some alleviation for us with, if all this money was going to DBHDD to help some of these kids, maybe we wouldn't see them on the dependency side, but that has not happened. So I would like to know where that correlation.
you know, they did try to further finesse the mental health bill from last year, the 1018 parity bill that,
Right.
And so House Bill 520
Okay.
does do that, but it's very little to do with DFACS. The only piece of it that seems to be connected with DFACS is the ability to seek a PRTF. And I was told that. I read the bill, I didn't see that. And that's a little hard right now, to be quite honest. You're trying to interpret why why this legislation is cropping up. Danny and I had an exchange about it today. You don't really know why you're seeing something. You're like, do we really need a law for this? And I think once the bill has crossed over, you start seeing what really is in there. So 520 did cross over. There's room for the language to change. I'm sure it will change. But right now, there's not a whole lot of difference in the way it was written, and it connects to DFACS right now. But I think there is some agreement that it is not. I mean, it was a huge piece of legislation. So of course there are going to be amendments to it, but
Right.
it isn't quite getting at what they had hoped.
Okay. Well, thanks for that information though. So that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll
So,
try
and
to-
we're watching that. So
Okay, great. Yeah, I see it on our other sheet. Yeah, thank you.
you know, before crossover day, you're checking to see what bills have been filed, to see if anything crops up last minute that just would throw a wrench in things. And now we know the ones that we're going to be tracking, and we start watching the language changing. And like 565, the one about TANF extension, we're already hearing that language is going to end up somewhere else. We're just going to be looking at where it's going. Okay. So we had, so with the budget, that's all I have on that right now. I am told that the big budget, the budget that starts July 1st, that will end, 2024, it should be voted on this week and passed. And so that's super fast. Not a lot of information out about that. I would imagine that the commissioner will testify again, and we can get read into what is in that FY24 budget. Of course, we know the $2,000 raise. I don't think we're going to see anything. I don't think we're going to see any problems with that at all. But relating to these other issues that we're hoping to get at, I'll be interested to see how that all maps out with the FY24 budget. But as far as the small budget that ends June 30th, there's that money in there for hoteling, and there is money in there for OFI. I believe that money will be used to continue to hire up the 500 additional staff who are hopefully going to help mediate the reviews that are coming up and the reclassification around Medicaid. There's a lot of concern about what's going to happen there. And so I think trying to get ahead of it and get some of the positions in place, that $4 million is for that. It says security upgrades for benefits. I don't know what that is. In the talking about it, it was talked about to try to bring forward this. Yes, Janidra.
So I've got a lot to do here. I got to take my hand down. I've got to take my phone off. Take my computer off mute. So sorry about that, y'all.
I mean, in person is just so much easier, right?
All right. So I was just gonna hit a little bit on when you talked about the Medicaid and talked about the budget that's showing for the 500 positions. So not sure if and I apologize, I haven't been on in the last few times because I've been really busy. So my area or my team, which is a special operations team, we are creating a statewide renewal team. And in this renewal team, we are hiring these candidates or that we've been afforded through the budget to bring on board to help with Medicaid renewals, because Medicaid renewals based upon the pandemic and the waivers we were afforded, we were able to extend those out and we haven't had to do them. Right. So we lost a lot before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And so reality is when we get back to full speed ahead and back to business as normal, we will not have the manpower to do it. And so that's the hope that we can onboard this personnel off the street to new candidates and not necessarily pull from the state, the field, right, to create a team where we can be prepared. So we have about 450 or 500 or so that are onboarding that we're hiring that we will train in family Medicaid. And I think as of this morning, we probably onboarded maybe about 160, somewhere around in there. So we're working full speed ahead. If you know of anybody, this is my plug, right? That is interested in working for the state from a OFI case manager standpoint, please let them know that the link is out there. It will say statewide position. It will say a statewide case manager or statewide renewal team. So that's just really what that is based upon. There hasn't been a whole lot of changes to Medicaid other than pregnant woman. They're looking to extend it, whereas before they were covered for 90 days and they pushed that to 6 months, and now that's going to be for a year. So that's just the updates in reference to some of the Medicaid and OFI piece of it that ties into that bill.
That's so helpful. And for the
Question, I have a question for Janedra. It's good to hear your voice, by the way, Ms. Jackson.
Yes, hey,
Y'all were able to hire from the county's region, correct, for these positions?
So no, so really what we're doing right now, Danny, is we're hiring. So we're looking to hire. There's two things that's going on in reference to the statewide team that reports to me under special operations. One is we are hiring the brand new applicants off the street, right? That's not pulling from the field at all. That's people that are off the street that are looking to apply for those positions. And that's where that group is coming from. We can hire and promote internally if they are a business support person, or we do have some temp staff that where we've been looking to kind of help facilitate our offices. So we can definitely hire for those. The other piece of that, Danny, that they're doing for the statewide perspective, which is different than this bill, but still kind of ties to, is we're shifting the renewal team that was, I apologize.
Hey, we all have one.
I just wish they would just drop the package off and not ring the doorbell. But anyway, so we have, we're shifting from renewal staff, meaning case managers, supervisors and such, to more of a combined unit, which is a statewide renewal team, so that we can look at increasing our quality and allowing us to focus more centralized than we are when we were in the field. When I say we, right?
All right, so supervisors, if I'm an OFI supervisor in Cherokee, I'm not going to be pulled into this statewide team, or could I be?
You could be if you are supervising renewal staff that are completing renewals.
Okay, if I'm a supervisor, would I have a choice?
So I don't think right now there is a choice, Danny. I think that they're looking at it from the standpoint of how do we service this? How do we service this team? Most supervisors right now actually either are going to be supervising renewals or they're supervising applications, for lack of a, to kind of just keep that simple. And so they're looking to kind of specialize even more because it's hard. Our accuracy is not where it needs to be. And I know, sorry, Susan, we've gotten off of the bill, but Danny, just to answer your question, to focus on accuracy, they're looking to kind of divide, and so that we can be more focused on either renewals or applications, so that we can monitor in our what we service our clients with and make sure that we're giving them accurate benefits and timely benefits, because we're hit with a lot of that we're unable to accommodate because we're trying to juggle so many things.
Thank you. That gravel road trip was my fault. My apologies.
That's okay. You can always call me Danny.
Actually, that's great to know that and to know how, because sometimes I'm asked. In fact, I talked to the Georgia Office of Policy and Budget on Friday. They wanted a quote about OFI salaries. Of course, I was happy to give that, but this is helpful because we talked a lot about this sort of tsunami that's facing OFI, and
yes,
what can be done to support them. And so this is very helpful. The qualifications to apply for one of these jobs, do you know what they are?
Yes. So we're looking for primarily customer service experience. I believe they have to have 1 full year of customer service experience. And of course, a high school diploma. They have changed the criteria some. It used to be, college degree, it used to be some college. So now they're looking for customer service background, heavy customer service background, and at least a high school diploma or GED.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I'm going to zip through this legislation and really probably just focus on the legislation that I think is most pertinent. We're not going to spend any time on the ones that didn't cross over unless I think I've shared everything there is about those. So the first bill we were watching was 216. Basically, it extends the length of time of respite care for foster parents for longer than it is now. And somewhere in my notes, I have the length of that, and off the top of my head, it's left me. We support that, and the subject matter expert supports that. It crossed over, so I don't foresee any issues with that. Senate Bill 230, it is being carried by someone who is pretty influential, Matt Brass, and it is the foster parents. It's changing up the foster parents' Bill of Rights. And while some of it is good, I think hopefully some of the language can be finessed. The adds the right to obtain legal counsel and removes the retaliation from the department. I mean, both of those things sort of imply that foster parents who are working with the department to return a child home sets it up that where it could be fairly contentious. So I am guessing that is why the agency does not support that bill as it stands right now. It did cross over, so this is one we will be watching very closely. Senate Bill 133, it is to this is the big bill. We're also watching it very, very closely. We have some great notes in here if you have time to read them from our subject matter experts. And if you have anything you want to add to this, then I'm happy to add it. I'm not attaching any names to it because I want people to feel free to respond and give their feedback without feeling like, their name is attached to something that is sometimes it's potentially politically a little, and this is one of them, because from what I understand, the juvenile court judges are not happy at all about this legislation. And so it sort of puts us in an odd place, recognizing that we need something like this, but being careful to not come out, with our guns blazing, knowing that our juvenile court judges are not happy about it. So basically it's not as broad as it could have been, and you'll see this in the notes. There's really no mention of holding anybody more accountable than they're being held right now. It just allows for a pause before a child comes into custody for DFACS to go in and try to locate resources. There is a chance that the language in this bill could become more robust. And I think in order for it to be much ado about anything, that would be needed. Anybody want to comment on? And I think our subject matter experts are on the line. If anybody has a question that could be answered or an opinion, let me see.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. So is this something that has to do with kids being found dependent from the bench in a DJJ type situation?
Yes.
Okay. And it's just to kind of make that uniform across all of the circuits or whatever?
Yes. And to put some procedures in place that I was talking with yesterday at the Capitol, a case manager in the metro area who had done family preservation and then had moved over to adoption. And we were walking back to our car, and he was saying that, what's so frustrating is that, every juvenile court judge is different. So you don't know in a big county what you're going to get. And of course, in a small county, you might not know either, but basically it is the beginning of conversations to put some processes in place that would, that the judges would need to follow in order to deprive a child from the bench that is not necessarily an abuse or neglect situation. It is the child's needs are so great the family can't manage them. Long way to go here. This is a beginning.
Yeah. Which speaks to the stuff we just talked about, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes. So there's that legislation. Then
Okay,
there's
thank you.
Senate Bill 134 that Danny and I talked about today. I listened, the agency supports this. And so I listened kind of loosely that, you know, it seemed benign when it was being described. It was in the best interest of the child, and I have to be sworn under oath to testify. Danny and I were talking about it. He had looked at it and seems to read to him. And so
I have too many questions.
you have too many questions. Okay. Yeah. We don't
I
have.
just want to know the backstory on it
Yeah.
because, you know, it's like I told you, I really feel like it was almost like you can present evidence that was used for something else.
And
you know,
that is
And
troublesome.
that's what I don't like. And not that, I mean, obviously it would make it easier for a DA to pull something up from, you know, this court, from juvenile court and bring up, but I don't know. I mean, I had a lot more questions. To me, it was cutting corners.
Yeah.
But I don't know the basis of why somebody wanted to do it, if that makes sense.
I've added that to my homework to see if I can get some background on that. Bill Cowsert, of course, is a very powerful legislator. He's the governor's brother-in-law. He's from Athens. And I'm going to see if I can get a little more background on that. And then we'll revisit that one, Danny. House Bill 460. This is the raise the age legislation from last year. If you were on this committee, Georgia is one of very, very few states who does not, who will try a 17-year-old as an adult and does not allow the legal protection or right to counsel that extends all the way up to 18th birthday. It is one of 3 states, along with Texas and Wisconsin, that processes 17-year-olds as adults in the criminal justice system. And they send them to adult court rather than the juvenile court. Last year's legislation was much bigger, really wanted to change that law, but it couldn't get it passed because of some concern from the Judiciary Committee about the cost. And so this year, this legislation is only proposing to put together a committee that would study how this can get changed in Georgia. So it is a step in the right direction. I've already heard it did cross over that the OPB is already asking around today about how is there money in the budget to implement this? How much is this going to cost? And that is really what the committee is supposed to do. So going to watch this one closely. I don't see any reason not to support it. If it gets defeated, it is going to be because someone gives indication that it's going to be outrageously expensive and there's no money to implement it. So we're watching.
Yeah, and you know, I reviewed this and none of what, I mean, it didn't really speak to what you're talking about. That's why I was kind of interested about why it said raise the bill. It really only talked about what kind of has already been out there. I know a lot of the courts are already appointing attorneys to children, independent of like a guardian ad litem. They'll have their own child attorney that's supposed to represent whatever it needs, what they want versus what's in their best interest. And it just really kind of talked a lot about that, talked about cases coming from probate court where the child is, you know, has been like, there's whether or not the guardianship needs to be continued or
I think we've moved into 291, but they are connected. That's the one that you read. So
where were you? Because
connected.
I skipped. Where were you? What were you talking about?
I was talking about the raise the age bill, which would it's still connected because this would be to not try 17-year-olds in adult court and to allow them to have representation. Now, of course, if they did a serious offense, I don't think there's any getting around that. They're not going to be tried in family court or juvenile court. But
you're talking about in 460, House Bill 460.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I read. That's what I'm telling you. I didn't see that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought were talking, because you also
No,
read
I was
291.
talking about what you're
Sorry.
talking about. And it
Okay.
really didn't talk about that. And then it also, when it does the intro, it talks a lot about permanent guardianship stuff. And they took all that out in the most recent version. So I guess I didn't really, what they talked about was appropriate, but I didn't see where it was anything related to raise the age, I guess is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
It is really just to put a committee together to
Okay.
study this issue. And I think that was the only way this was going to get passed, is my understanding. Sorry, didn't mean to.
Yeah,
twirl
no,
your
that's
gun.
okay. It's confusing. Thank you.
The next legislation that I think you also looked at just added to the list of providers who could participate in appointing a guardian for an adult. This is not, it's really just shoring up some language as I understand it. I don't think I added, let's see. Yes. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you for this feedback. I don't know that it would affect our work all that much. Doesn't seem to be anything egregious in there. So if y'all are okay, I'm going to move on down just for the sake of time to 603, which did not cross over. We talked about that one already. That's the one that would add to the extenuating circumstances to move directly to TPR. Then House Bill 129. This is the governor's legislation. It did cross over. It made it out of the House. It now will be considered by the Senate, but I actually think the Senate has read it and has no problem with it. So this one will probably sail right through. It extends TANF benefits to pregnant women. Of course, our SME feedback is, oh goodness. Y'all know that is the agency phone I still have from 6 years ago when I retired, and it rings like once a year. So y'all heard it. It's probably a solicitor call. Anyway, this legislation, the concern is the staffing. Of course, you're going to have more people apply for TANF, and it being probably at best, probably a 7-month window from when someone, recognizes that they are pregnant through when birth or the end of the pregnancy. It seems like there might be a fair amount of tracking there because of that short window. So that's really got to be worked out. There's great support for this because it would allow a benefit for pregnant women who really are very low income, but definitely need to talk about the staffing that might be required to track that. We've talked about 565, which extends the months from 48 to 60, did not cross over, but we likely will see that language added to another piece of legislation after crossover. 428 did not cross over. It was around continuous eligibility for Medicaid and Peach Care, which probably feels too much like expansion of Medicaid for it to really get any traction. The remaining legislation is not anything that I feel is super high priority. It is legislation we're tracking that may or may not have some impact, or it's related to child support and aging. And we have a few members from child support and aging, not a ton, and I don't have subject matter experts in those departments, but I'm tracking it just because it would impact their work to some degree. Also added in the Senate Bill 61, and it makes permanent the ability to use sick leave for the care of immediate family members. I think state employees can already do that, right? Yeah, okay. So I don't know who that impacts because this would be state employees. So I just wanted to watch that to see what the nuances of change are to that. It crossed over as well. Then Senate Bill 131, while the agency is supportive of it, this is just cleaning up language that was conflicting. It doesn't change anything or the practices that we have as it is written right now. We will continue to watch that. Senate Bill 84 is around aging and elder abuse. House Bill 242. It is a this is one that Carol recommended that we pay attention to. I didn't pick up on this one in reading it. It didn't seem to apply to us, but she feels like it could, it's not stated here, but it has the potential to give some funds to aid youth in care in getting a driver's license. So we're watching that one. I don't know a lot about it, but she heard the testimony on it and just felt like we should add it to this list in case there were some resources, because we know that is an issue. House Bill 571 is an aging bill. I'm 99% sure, I don't think it crossed over and I didn't update it. This extends their plan from 3 to 4 years, and I don't think it crossed over. So they're still stuck writing this plan every 3 years is what it looks like. House Bill 6 did not cross over. This comes up every year to try and use SNAP benefits or public assistance benefits for the purpose of, with public assistance, I think you can purchase diapers and hygiene products, but not with SNAP. And so this is related to that, and it didn't cross over. So we'll let that one go. House Bill 479 was somewhat concerning, but only because there was some other language in there that could make it difficult when throughout the adoption process, but that bill didn't cross over, so we won't worry about that. The next bill, House Bill 38, did not cross over. It, of course, is related to Medicaid expansion and does not have support in Georgia. And then House Bill 64, I do not believe, oh yes, it did cross over. I apologize, I should have updated this. This allows adults who have been adopted access to their original birth certificate. And no issues really here. It crossed out of the Senate. It'll be debated by the House, probably will move forward. The Senate Bill 135 is related to establishing paternity. It basically reconciles the aligns some newer evidentiary and medical genetic testing with the Act of 2017. Then we have House Bill 1. It did not cross over. It did not get any traction. House Bill 69 did not cross over either. And then House Bill 520 did cross over. It is the legislation that is, hang on a second, let me look at this. Oh, what we talked about earlier. These are the tweaks to the mental health parity bill from last year that I've heard would include some provision for DFACS to seek PRTF as one of the options, but I have not seen that in there. So this, the legislation that did not cross over, I'm going to take off of this list just to simplify it, and then we will begin tracking the hearings as they move through on the legislation that did cross over. I know we had several other things on the agenda, that one of them was the May conference, and I am just so sad that that is not going to happen. We are working right now to reschedule that into the 2023 year. I don't have, I would like to have that in calendar year 2023. I think that the contract that we signed with Lanier Islands, they will hold us harmless for that if we can get that scheduled in 2023. I'm supposed to sit down and talk through both the annual conference and the Lanier Island conference with the folks in budget as soon as session is over. I've talked to the board about this. We have some ideas for actually trying to come and provide some virtual training and to our workshops and to come to some counties and do some meet and greets and maybe some professional development training. That's really brand new. We just talked about it yesterday, but to continue to offer some professional development options and some networking options in addition to the advocating that we're doing. We may need to go on the road rather than have staff come to a conference. One other thing I will add is that after this session ends, we had a call about the importance of, while we have the attention of legislators around these raises, and they're great, and we are so appreciative of the $5,000 last year and the $2,000 in the upcoming year. There are some things that still have to be addressed to make some real progress in retention. And if you look at the pay scale for educators and for some other social work, human services jobs, there is an increase that is connected to years of service. And there's recognition from the group that I talked with that are GPHSA members who are really supporting this advocacy, that we are always pulling from the front line, because the only way to make more money is to move up, which is great. But there are not that many positions that you can move up to, or to leave. And so there's not really money that would compensate you for the amount of time. There was a career ladder that was developed, and I think with the raises, sort of, that's kind of a wash. And so I will be reaching out to the legislators while they have this understanding of how complicated this work is to encourage them to consider a different pay scale, one that includes compensation for years in service, and also, I don't have my notes in front of me. There are two things that I'm going to be talking about. And so just wanted you to be aware of those advocacy efforts that will start as we start looking to the budget for FY25. There's no way to impact FY24. It's pretty much been cast. And FY25 will be wrapping up in November. That's really kind of the end of it.
Yeah, I
Andy.
think that's an excellent idea, Susan. And used to, when I started, I mean, we did get annual increments, based on your anniversary date. And then you got your regular performance, increase. But yeah, because kind of like a cost of living thing.
Yes.
And I think, we didn't struggle with retention way back then.
Yes.
And I know, times are different, but I think we also need to be able to be willing to change and look at different things. So I think that's a great conversation to have. And I think Angie put something in the chat about maybe
She
the other
did.
thing you were going to mention.
Spoken like a former president.
I know, I was
Yeah.
thinking this might be a board member kind of discussion.
The thought about GPHSA going out instead of the members coming somewhere, the concern is GPHS travel will increase, but with no conferences, revenue will go down. And that is a thought. There'll have to be a balance that is struck. I worry I want the members to know that we're doing something. And this wouldn't be rampant visits. This is probably like to 5 or 6 locations for one day. So there's no overnight. There would be some mileage, but that would really be all. And I just feel like we need to just continue to show we're working, or else we might lose members, and I don't want to do that. And so I'm writing up a proposal for the board to look at, and then we'll talk about whether it makes sense or not. Nothing will happen without the board's approval. So just kind of put a pin in that. So when we discuss what I send out, we can weigh, what do you think, about the cost versus the income. Now, and also I believe we are going to have a conference, at least 1 or 2, maybe more, in the next fiscal year. I've not heard that budget looks as tight. So I think ideally we would have them early in the fiscal year. So rarely does anything happen. Like, we're at the end of the year now. And so it's riskier probably to have something in the spring. So we may move that Lanier Island to the first of the summer and have another one at the end of the summer, or to the fall. So, and I'm just tossing out information right now. We're trying to regroup and figure out how to do that.
Yeah. And I just think too, though, I was talking to, I think Angie, she's on here, might have been another director. When we talk about retention, it's always sad when they cut out these things, because I think a lot of staff really enjoy, and I'm not just talking about GPHSA, but really enjoy going, because a lot of these summits that we go to does have people other than DFAC staff. And so I actually had a worker a couple of weeks ago email me really wanting to go to the domestic violence conference, which luckily is in September. So hopefully, she'll be good. But it's just, it feels like, what they should look as retention other than just money, but other things. When I interview, and I've been doing a lot lately, some applicants will ask, what do y'all offer in terms of professional development? So it's important. In my opinion, I think like maybe the new worker training can stay virtual, because that's more of a classroom type setting. And it's just all new workers. But I think that so much is missed out on when you cut out the other big summits where they have a chance to really interact with people across the state, not just DFAC staff, but CASA, OCA, DJJ, judges even at some of them. So that's just, it just kind of is a bummer when something like that happens. But
and I agree. It's a hard thing. And I can't remember the last time we had travel restrictions. So, I don't know what it is that is, I don't know what it is that has moved through the money. I don't have any real insight on it.
Yeah, I just hope they don't, push this whole virtual thing as like a forever thing. I mean, I get some meetings can be done virtually, and I'm all about that. I don't mind doing, we don't have a face-to-face county director meeting every month. We do virtually. So that's, I get that, but I just think.
Not going to have any this month with no travel.
Yeah. I hear you.
Okay. Well, Susan, I guess we need to just go ahead and try to wrap up, since it is a little bit after 4. I think it's been some great conversation, great information, and thank you for keeping us updated. And we'll continue to refer to the spreadsheet that has the legislation on there. And I know you said you're going to be removing some of it, so we'll make sure that we know what is remaining so we can follow that. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, concerns, or anything else before we adjourn the meeting?
Hey, this is Jennifer. I just wanted to say thanks for letting our group from Region 13 Next Level join you guys for the Capitol tour yesterday. And I'm sorry that I missed it. I was at home sick, but We got some good feedback from the people who attended. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. It was great having them there. And I do think they really got something out of it. So I'm glad they came. And I hope we can offer it again. And let's just go ahead and look while we're on here. The next legislative meeting is April 4th at, and the session will be over by then, at 3:00. So that may be spring break for some folks, but that is what we have on the calendar.
Well, you said that's that first week of April.
Yes.
Yeah, probably will be spring break. I guess we could just poll and see if there'll be enough people to attend and go from there.
Yes. My only thing is I couldn't move it a week back. And a week ahead of that is going, we would have to move it to later in April. A week ahead of that is going to be, the session will not be wrapped up by then. So, maybe we go forward with that meeting and record
I'm
it.
in a meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap up and, we'll stay with that date and we'll record it just in case. I know some people may be on spring break, but the timing of it is really perfect for what we actually have that's been voted on. It'll all be wrapped up.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be great. We'll send out something to remind people. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Well,
Susan,
thanks
thank you.
everybody.
Great
All right.
conversation.
Have a good
guys.
rest of the day. Bye-bye.